semantics and then syntax. It could have been the other way around also, but let us study first semantics for the simple reason that yesterday we ended our discussion on discussing the meaning and the process of meaning as it is created. Semantics studies exactly that process of creation of meaning in language. It is that discipline of linguistics which studies meaning as created and conveyed through language. So the process of creation and the process of conveying the meaning, both of them are important. I think there is some disturbance. Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then it's all right. So, in semantics, we study various categories that help us convey the meaning. You would remember that yesterday we discussed what is a word. And in that, we studied at least two types of words. One type of word which is independent in itself, one unit. And then there is a type of word which is constituted of apparently multiple units. The basic definition of word we had given yesterday, something that conveys a meaning. That sequence of sound which conveys a meaning is a word. In every language, there are various semantic categories for words. You know, there are some very traditional categories also, which we understand as parts of a speech, partie du discours. So according to that, the example that I had given you yesterday was pomme de terre. Now, if you take this, you can break pomme as a noun, terre as a noun, and the separately can be considered a preposition, but pomme de terre is itself a noun. This is how we try to understand words. Like pomme de terre itself becomes a noun, so it becomes a word. So similarly, there are various types of words, as we can see here, that a preposition is a word, but at the same time, a word may be constituted of different words which in other contexts may appear to be independent entities as a word in the language. So there are various usages, and according to there are various categories, what we call taxonomic classifications, used for understanding the intended meaning of words. Some of these we will try to see. For example, determiners, you know already. What is a determiner? That determines the quantity of an object. They, in French at least, they depend upon the gender and number. And then there is a concordance of gender and number. Now, determiners may exist in English also. They may exist in several Indian languages also. But the concordance principles will be different. And in this sense, the way we convey the meaning, that differs from one language to the other language. Hence, semantics is very much based in a particular language, even though there are general principles. according to which we classify the words. Determiners will be there in all the languages, but how determiners will behave, that varies from one language to the other language. As for example, in English, a and the, you know a and an, how it behaves in English, but you will not find a parallel to this an or a in French. What we find in French parallel to this is un and une. You see that there is a very clear demarcation of gender in case of French. And it is not only a question of language having gender or not having gender. As for example, in Indian languages, what happens? Hindi has both masculine and feminine gender. Bangla doesn't have, that's fine. But in Hindi also, when we say ek ladka, we still say ek ladki. There is no feminine form of ek. It's like a boy and a girl. Not so in French. So it depends. In various Indian languages, you will find these determiners behaving differently, and this difference is independent of the fact that the language has natural genders along with the genders arbitrarily assigned to nouns, or if they don't have. Even in French, you will find that, though I have given the example of un, une, de, le, la, you know all these genders, de, toi, chaque, beaucoup, tout. Here you see, for example, for beaucoup, for chaque, there is no gender demarcation. Like it exists for un and une, le and la, in plural, the gender demarcation does not exist. So gender is there, yet as per number, its concordance varies. You will find words like quel. Now I say quel, but you know that quel, when you write, there would be variations according to number and gender. Yet when we speak, it is just one. So that we have to understand, and remember always that it is the speech which prevails the most. So there is only one quel, but there is difference between un, une, le, la, because these are different sound units. These are different sequence of sounds, but not so in chaque, beaucoup, quel. There will be differences between se, set, set. Now you see set. It has two possibilities. When you use set, it may be feminine, it may be masculine before a word that begins with a noun, begins with a vowel, begins with a vowel. So these differences exist in the category determiners in French. You may not find any parallel of this in other languages. These issues we have to understand. There are several, like plupart, plusieurs. It doesn't change with numbers. Chaque doesn't change with numbers. And then there are various ways of writing it, various placing arrangements will be there in a sentence. As for example, let me give you an example of 3 sentences in French. Toutes les feuilles étaient mortes. You understand the sentence? Very simple. Toutes les feuilles étaient mortes. Okay, all leaves were dead. This can be written also as les feuilles étaient toutes mortes. Look at the placement of determiner. So the kind of determiner that we are using, its placement may also vary. There is another possibility. Tous les étudiants ont bien mangé. It can be written also, les étudiants ont tous bien mangé. And we use these kinds of variations in a language. and determiners may be placed and differently in a sentence, and accordingly sometimes the emphasis on the meaning might change. So look at this determiner, which is just a category of word, but its placement may change the way we convey the meaning. Where you have placed determiners, it varies the meanings. In the speech, in written format of language, all this, its usages might be different. So how we convey meaning through the placement of determiner. Determiner will have only one meaning. If you look at the dictionary, it has only one meaning. But where we have placed the determiner in a sentence, a determiner like tous, it varies not only the meaning that we convey, but if remember, even phonologically, it changes. So, les étudiants ont tous bien mangé. Normally, we don't say les étudiants ont tout bien mangé, but we will say tous les étudiants. Spelling is the same. But in pronunciation, in speech, we find them as two different ways of expressing, which exhibits a morphological change also, because tu does not have sa in pronunciation. But in another situation, tous, when we pronounce tous, les étudiants ont tous bien mangé, we have added sa. So here you find a certain morphological addition also. And that morphological addition helps us convey certain emphasis in the meaning. So determiner as a category, it becomes very important. There are several determiners that you can identify. Quelque, which has both singular and plural, but no gender attached to it. Then autre, no gender attached, but singular and plural format. However, in speech, there is no singular plural here. So we have to be very careful the way we use determiners in French, because we have to be aware that many times it will reflect the natural gender and number, and many times in speech it will not refer to natural gender, and of course consequently it will not exhibit even the artificially assigned gender. There are several such determiners which might exhibit, for example, possessions also, like mo, ma, ton, ta, te, all this. And you have to be very careful that in this list, it will exhibit gender and number, whereas in several other lists, as we discussed, it does not exhibit gender and number. So the concordance rules are slightly arbitrary. In speech, even it is even more arbitrary. In the written form, we have tried to represent showing gender and number, but language, if you define, if you understand it as primarily spoken form as the speech form, so the numbers, the number of forms are much less in the spoken form of language. Similarly, there are other categories of verbs, of words. Nouns and verbs. Nouns we understand. After the determiner, we understand the noun. It can be either masculine or feminine. Neuter gender is also there in language, but generally not in French. In French, there is hardly any notion of neuter gender in the spoken forms of language. It is there in English, and it is there in several other languages. In Indian languages, if you know Marathi, Marathi language has neuter gender. So similarly, there are other languages also. Sanskrit has neuter gender. There are several languages, contemporary language also, which have neuter gender. But in French, we don't have any neuter gender. We will have le cheval, la jument, le garçon, la fille, and many such others. So we know that in French, there are artificially assigned genders, and there is, of course, the natural gender that exists in almost every language. And there are very clear rules generally to make feminine form of a word, as we may notice in case of determiners also. But by and large, the nouns are arbitrarily and conventionally decided and used accordingly. There is no reason why we should call le cheval, le cheval. There is no reason for this. This is arbitrary and decided on the basis of the convention of the language. So remember these two words, arbitrary and conventional. Nouns are accorded meaning on the basis of an arbitrary and conventional decision in a university, in a speech society, in a society which speaks a particular language. It will be certainly arbitrary. Generally, there could be one or two types of nouns where this arbitrariness is less, but in general, these two principles apply, that for assigning nouns, we have arbitrariness and we have a convention. These two aspects are very important regarding the linguistic behavior or meaning of nouns. Another category we said is verb. The verb in French exhibit inflection according to three types: time, aspect, and mood. Inflection, I hope you understand the word. Inflection simply means change in the form of the word, what generally we call conjugations, but conjugations are something that is added in a written form. Inflection is the speech. In a spoken form, verbs exhibit these three forms: time, aspect, and mood. Generally, we talk only of time, but aspect is very important in a language, whether in English or in French or anything. Because times, in terms of time, there are only three: past, present, and future. There cannot be any other time. Time, there are only three in any language: past, present, and future. We generally study present, then past, and then future. But there are other conjugations that we always learn. So those are mostly aspect of verb in a language. There are generally four types of aspects in French language. In some other language there could be more, in some there could be less, but in French we have generally four aspects, and you know about them. L'aspect habituel, the habitual aspect. L'aspect imparfait. Now, imparfait is not a time. It is something within the category of past. So, time is only past. So, we understand that l'aspect imparfait. Imparfait, it can be there in present also, it can be there in future also, it can be there in past also. Then the third is l'aspect perfectif. This perfect aspect, it can be there in all the three times. And l'aspect progressif, it can be there in all the three times. These are the four aspects. So let us try to understand them one by one. But before I continue, let me ask you if you have any questions till now. Are these points clear that we discussed? We have discussed about determiners. We have discussed how determiners behave in French. We have discussed what is semantics and the subject matter that we are going to study today. We have discussed that there are only three times: past, present, and future, and they are inflected, they are represented in terms of verb, and verbs reflect also aspect and mood. This we will study further. Presently, we are discussing the aspects in French language. So any confusion, any questions in this regard?
No, it's okay, sir.
So I had a question. When we talk about aspects, are we discussing? When you in English we talk about when we talk about tenses, we say simple present, present continuous, present perfect, and present perfect continuous. So, are we talking about this simple continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous when we talk about aspects, or is it something different?
English also has four aspects.
Uh-huh.
It has only four aspects. I
Uh-huh.
don't know, simple, there is nothing like an aspect. What you understand is the perfect, imperfect, habitual. English also has these aspects. Every time you will find present continuous,
Yes.
past continuous,
Yes, sir.
future continuous. So continuous is an aspect.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, and this comes from linguistics. It applies not only to one language, it applies to all the languages of the world. All the languages will have time and aspect.
Okay, sir.
And in aspect, the formal as the formal the form of the inflection of verb, that matters a lot. So the concept is the same whether in English or in French, but each language will have its own way of expressing aspects. All
Okay,
the
sir.
languages may not have necessarily only the four aspects. Okay, English also has four aspects, but we will not discuss that.
Okay,
The
sir.
aspects in English. And it is very important to understand that aspects are always more important than the time, at least so far as the conjugation of the verbs are concerned or the behavior of the verbs in conveying meaning is concerned. Is it fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Any other question? Okay. So let me continue. So habitual aspect in French. You know, by habitual means the repeated action as a habit. Now, this can be there in present as well as in past, and also it may be in future. For example, je bois du lait le matin. What does it mean? Je bois du lait le matin. It simply means I drink milk in the morning. But is it a habitual aspect or is it one time action? We have
Habitual.
to understand it. Well, by context, you know it is a habit, but it may not be a habit. There is nothing which indicates that it is a habit except for that you guess it. You guess it by the context, you understand it. But this is an aspect in French that je bois, this form of present indicative, generally called present indicative, might convey habitual aspect also. Whether it is one time action, whether it is a continuous action, or whether it is a habitual action, all this will be conveyed by the same form. So when we address, let's say, translation, when we apply this into many other fields, if we have to translate the sentence, then we have to apply our understanding of this aspect as applicable to a particular sentence in a particular context. All of you immediately say, je bois du lait le matin is a habitual aspect. But if I remove le matin, je bois du lait, le matin is not part of the verb. It is an additional information given in the sentence, which helps us determine the context. If I only say je bois du lait, you will not say that it is a habitual aspect. So that means the habitual aspect is there in the language in terms of semantics, but not in terms of inflection of the verb. The verb does not reflect the habitual aspect in general, yet the language in terms of meaning has the habitual aspect. Is it fine? So this is what we understand in semantics, that now we try to understand how meaning is being created and being conveyed. And of course, in past, if you say, je buvais du lait le matin, je buvais du lait le matin, what does it mean? It is certainly a habitual aspect. I used to drink. Je bu du lait le matin and je buvais du lait le matin. What is the difference? The difference is of aspect. We have said an imperfective aspect, and we can use the same verbal structure to convey the habitual aspect. So similarly, je boirai du lait le matin, it can be habitual only because of le matin. If you remove le matin, the conjugations, the verbal inflection does not convey anything regarding this, but we need to convey such meanings in a sentence. Hence, we have to be aware, and the speakers are aware, that they add le matin. Without adding le matin, it may not be a habitual aspect. So you add something regarding the time, whether it is le matin, Dieu, jour, or nuit, anything like that. So you may have to add some marker that may help us identify the habitual aspect in French in all the three times. Then l'aspect imparfait. I said just now, the imperfect aspect where the action is not complete, is not yet perfected. It is there in both present and past. For example, je bois du lait. We have just now used it. Now, je bois du lait, it also means that I am drinking milk and I drink milk. Both. I am drinking is a continuous aspect. And continuous means imperfect. That the action is not complete, which means the action is going on. So in French, we make no distinction in such inflections, and it may convey both the meanings. Yet, in case if you try to emphasize, if you want to be emphatic in the continuous aspect, in the imperfective aspect, then we may say, je suis en train de. We may add one expression, en train de. So, you know all these expressions because you know the language. But what is the function of this? All this comes under one category, and that is imperfective aspect. Je boirai du lait and je serai en train de boire du lait. Je bois du lait, je suis en train de boire du lait, je boirai du lait, je serai en train de boire du lait. Now you see the progressive aspects that is conveyed by different strategies and by different morphemic addition. That means addition of meaningful units, like en train de, three meaningful units we have added in the sentence. So we add some meaningful units. And in this context, you will find that different languages will behave differently. So when we teach the language, we have to understand what is the natural way of saying similar things in the native language of the learner who is before us when we are teaching, trying to teach. And when we translate, also this will become very important. And when we analyze the meanings conveyed in a literary text, there also it becomes very important to understand what are the morphemic additions to convey the aspects. Here I have given examples from imperfective aspects and how they create and convey the meaning. The third aspect will be perfective aspect. Perfective aspect, we know. What is the perfective aspect? J'ai bu du lait. Generally, we call it passé composé or plus que parfait. J'avais bu du lait. In future also, j'aurais bu du lait. or j'aurais bu du lait. Now look at these aspects. J'aurais bu du lait, j'aurais bu du lait. All these three forms, they help us understand the perfective aspect. And it is there in all the three times. So the perfective aspect is very close to the formation that we often take, that avoir plus something. But you know that there is a list of verbs which take être. You know, in the similar situations. Okay. So the perfective aspect can be conveyed by
Pardon,
all.
pardon, monsieur. Pardon, monsieur. Actually, I am disturbing.
Chanchal,
I'm disturbing. Yes,
I
I'm
have seen
disturbing you
that
just
you have
because. Oh, sorry.
I have seen that you have raised hand. Just give me, let me finish this point, then I come to you. Okay, just wait. I have seen that you have raised the hand. Thank you. You have a question. I will just now come to you. Okay, just let me finish this point only. That avoir is used, and many times et is also used. These things differ. These aspects differ in from one language to the other language, and often if you go to the history of the language, you might get a clue that how it happens. As for example, you know that the verbs of verbs of motion are often conjugated with être. If you look at the old French, and you compare it with Old English, you will find that they are almost the same even in English. In English also, you will find that et will be there many times in conjugations in Old English, but present English, no, I have gone. Present English, but I am gone is also an acceptable structure just a few centuries ago, and even now in many contexts you will find traces of I am gone, I am done, I have done, I am done. You will find a difference between the two, and these things evolve in the language gradually. So in the perfective aspects also, how you use the verbs, how you inflect the verbs in different situations, that helps us create and convey certain meanings. This is what I intended to say. Now I stop and come to yes, Chanchalji, you wanted to say something?
Yes, sir. Actually, I am a little bit confused about those two pronunciations. J'aurais j'aurais bu. Est-ce qu'il est conditionnel et un autre plus futur simple?
No, see,
That's
j'aurais,
what is confusing, yes, sir.
no, j'aurais is future, and
I see.
j'aurais can be there with the conditional.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, sir. Okay,
that's the
thank
only
you.
thing. Okay, and sentences can be conjugated in both, and meanings are created differently. Okay, there is one more question, I believe, by someone. Someone else had said something. Is it in chat?
So I had a doubt rather.
Yeah, tell me.
We are talking about the continuous aspect, you know. So you mentioned the construct with être or trader. Now I've come across another construct. For example, if we have the construct les étudiants sont en train de finir l'exercice, so they are finishing the exercise. You know, somewhere I've come across this construct. Les étudiants vont en finissant l'exercice. Aller plus en plus the participle. Do they have an equivalent meaning, or is the aspect different?
No,
Aller plus
what is that? Those ade.
aller to go.
No. Ale is a different
Yeah.
aspect. But that is
Les étudiants vont en finissant l'exercice. They are
no.
finishing the
Vont en
exercise.
finissant.
Yeah,
Les
you know,
étudiants vont finir. We cannot say vont en finissant.
okay.
I'm not
Somewhere I
aware.
came across that construct, so that's what. Vont
Vont
finir
en
is the future
normal.
proche.
Yes, that's what we call futur proche. But
Yes.
so in French, futur is the time and proche is a certain strategy of aspect.
Yes.
But vont en finissant,
Uh, uh,
I have not seen it.
like
So
Samaladi va en primo. His illness is getting better. Uh, that somewhere I've come across this construct. I thought, never mind.
see, either it is a poetic use
Okay,
or a wrong use.
okay,
If it
sir.
is a poetic, yes, it may be some in some situation.
Okay,
So I'm not sure
okay,
what construction you are talking. I'm not sure of that. But generally, it is not used
okay, sir.
in the language in that sense.
Okay, sir.
So I think that's fine. Any other questions? Any confusions at any point? Okay, then I go to the next aspect, that is l'aspect progressive. Now, progressive aspect again is often not reflected on the verb. Progressive aspect, when two actions are there and one action is going on, it is in progress. So we have a structures like pendant, lorsque, en ce moment. We have several strategies to express it by meaning. So semantically, we have no addition to the verb. There is no morphemic addition to the verb, but we have expressions to be used here. So progressive aspect like pendant, lorsque tu mangeais, je suis venu. While you were eating. So we have several strategies to convey the progressive aspects. Quand je buvais du lait, je l'ai vu sortir de la maison. When I was drinking milk, I saw him or her going out of the house. Now, buvais and a view, je l'ai vu. So, one action is in imperfective aspect. The other action is in the perfective aspect. And these two together sometimes inform us about the progressive aspect in a sentence. And this aspect in French is slightly emphatic, showing that the action is in the middle of happening. Generally in French, we have almost nothing which says that the action is in the middle of happening as it gets reflected on the verb. Like je bois du lait is fine. Je buvais du lait is fine. Je bu du lait is fine. But quand je buvais du lait, je l'ai vu sortir de la maison. Now, this is the progressive aspects. These are generally the four aspects. And if you dig deeply, you may find even more aspects, but not so widely used in French. Yes, Sen Gupta ji, you have to say something?
Yes, sir. Bonjour. I have a question related to conditional passé and with C clause, and often we get confused in the formation of conditional passé and when to use something not fulfilled, not done. At that time, we were talking about that no possibility is there like that. Is it?
Just let me come gradually one by one, because see, I had said that initially that the inflection of the verb depends upon which aspects, which things in a language. It depends upon three: time, aspect, and mood. So conditional is a mood, just as subjunctive it is a mood. Then there are various ways of understanding conditional as well as subjunctive. Subjunctives are decided by the expressions in French. As such, subjunctive is a mood, but that is decided by the expressions, by the fixed expressions which require a subjective constructions. In conditional is another mood which has certain functions, as you know very well that it has certain functions. Politeness is one of them. Then whether you are sure of the action or not, certainty and politeness, these are the two main functions of conditional. So when to use time structure with conditional? Generally, you will find that in French, the subjunctive mood and the conditional mood, they are used only in present time. They are not used in past time and in future time. There is a history to it. There used to exist what we now call subjunctive passé and conditional passé. Generally, it is not used, but in some higher level of language, it may be used. So the situations when that is used are presently only one. What we call the inflection of verbs in terms of concordance of time, concordance du temps. If the previous expression is in past, then the later expression, which is in subjunctive or in conditional, they will be in past. For example, take any expression which requires subjunctive. Je pense qu'il vienne. No, je ne pense pas qu'il vienne. Je pense qu'il vient. But the moment we make it negative, now look at this structure. In its affirmative formation, it doesn't require subjunctive. But in its negative formation, it requires a subjunctive. Je ne pense pas qu'il vienne. Je ne pensais pas. Now the first part has gone into the past time. With which aspect? Je ne pensais pas. It can be habitual, it can be, depending upon the context, it can be imperfect aspect, depending upon the context. So, je ne pensais pas qu'il soit venu. Similarly, in conditional also, in conditional. Take a very simple, ordinary construction of conditional. Si j'étais jeune, j'irais à l'Himalaya. Now, a structure. Si j'étais jeune, je serais allé à l'Himalaya. You see the two different constructions. Which one would you consider past? J'irai is conditional. Je serais allé is past conditional. Je serais allé and j'irai. What is the difference in the meaning in conditional past? In present time, we will say that there is hardly any difference in the meaning. That is the contemporary structure in the French. In the older structures, we do find je serais allé, but we do not find similar structures in contemporary French. Yes, B. Sen Gupta ji, now tell me your questions with examples of past conditional.
Clear.
Yes.
Now it's clear.
Now it's clear? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is another aspect that we have studied. Now another thing that we should understand, in between you can do some exercises on your own whenever possible. Just try to identify time and aspect when you take any sentence in French before you. Just try to identify for a play that, okay, what is the time and what is the aspect. This helps us understand the language in all the three functions for which we normally learn language. One, for being a teacher, that is the part of didactics, for being a translator, and for analysis of language. We try to understand. Many times some of you might write poems, so you try to understand how meaning is created and conveyed. So you understand. When you study a poem, then again you have the same. I will just come to you, Chanchalji. Before I come to you, let me introduce one aspect, one part of the verb. Another thing that we notice in the verb is that there are two types of verbs. One is performative verb and the other is non-performative verb. This is very important because normally how do we define verbs? As action words. But there are verbs with which no action is attached. And there are verbs with which an action is attached. So performative verbs and non-performative verbs. As for example, inviter. You invite someone, so there is an action. Je vous invite. Parler, there is an action. Insister, there will be an action, then only there will be insistence. Okay. Promettre, you have to promise something, there will be an action. Okay. So this is one. The other aspect is that the verb itself denotes an action, no doubt about it. But the verb does not perform that action. If I say inviter, parler, the action is part of the verb itself. Je vous invite. So the action is part of the verb inviter itself. But there can be action apart from the verb. As for example, if I say marcher, okay, les soldats marchent. So marcher, I have said something, okay. I have said marcher. I think somebody has to put the mic on mute. Aditi Janji, I think please put your mic on mute. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So you see, for verbs like dormir, like parler, where action is included in the verb itself, the action is part of parler, whatever it means. Now, dormir is not part of the verb. Dormir can be spoken, and dormir as an action is something different. So there are two types of verbs that we find in a language: performative verbs and non-performative verbs. These two are very important concepts that we have to understand, that how meaning is construed. Because we may ask, if I say je dors bien, so how is dormir a verb? Because there is no action attached to it. It is not an action. Dormir itself is a cessation of all the actions. All cessation of all the actions. The actions have ceased to exist. Only then I can sleep. So sleeping, thinking, how will you do it? Separately. So these two are very important ways of constructing meaning in a language. One type of verb which are associated to an action denoted by the verb other than the speech, and the other type of verb which convey the action itself. So these two aspects of verbs also we have to understand: performative verbs and non-performative verbs. And mostly, many times you will find that different languages use them differently. Now I come to your questions. Yes, Chanchalji, you had a question, I believe.
Yes, sir. Actually, I find it's very interesting that previously the aspects which were so relevant, like the passé subjunctive, nowadays actually it is becoming almost extinct in the present French when we come to read the present novels, etc. That's what I was saying.
Yes, that is true.
I mean to say, sir, that which were so relevant in the previous era, in the older languages, like in the writings of the previous masters like Alexandre Dumas, etc. But nowadays, even when we come to read the present, even at the time of Camus or Sartre, the passé subjunctive were very rarely used, almost unused in their languages. That's what. So,
Yes.
so how come the aspects which were so relevant in the previous era become extinct? Is it because the language is rejecting, or some aspects are dying?
See, it is not an aspect. Subjunctive is a mood and passé is a time. So there are certain conjugations in certain moods which are no more required, they die. And, and the language changes accordingly. Language changes in many ways. Now, if you look at the history of language, for example, what is future? How do you construct future? If you look at it carefully, like in English, in French also you will find, in English, I will go. What is will? This means I desire to go. I have a desire to go. So actually, if you look at the history of language, there is no notion of future time. It is all my desire to do something. I wish to eat. So I will eat. I will. Will is the verb. I wish to eat if I use the contemporary language. So in the same way, subjunctive and others also, the language keeps changing. That's why I gave you an example that in earlier languages of Europe, there was no distinction between être and avoir. Avoir simply means possession, and être simply meant a state of existence. So, I am gone, je suis allé. I am gone is my state of existence. I am no more there, I am gone. Je suis allé. Still, you find in traces. These changes keep happening in the language. And there are forms which are considered redundant because we do not construct meaning and convey meaning in the same manner. So these forms come primarily due to semantic changes, which is a very big issue in language, the semantic change. And then gradually they get reflected in their phonological and their morphological counterparts, which help us construct a meaning. Yes, Arvind Tiwari ji, you have a question?
Yes, Tilve, sir, not Tiwari. Yes, I had
Tilwai, yes.
it's more of a doubt than a question. I'm a bit confused. You said that there were four aspects: habitual, imperfect, perfective, and progressive. And then just before you took up the questions, you talked about something called a performative aspect.
No, yes.
So I'm a bit confused about that.
Yes, you are correct. I myself stopped immediately. Here, aspect, I use the word. I should not have used the word aspect. Aspect here I used in a general sense, that there are two types of verbs. In that sense, I use that every verb has two functions, and there are two types of functions in a language. That's what I meant when I talked about performative and non-performative. Aspect is a very technical term. We use it in general language also, that what is the aspect of truth, what is the aspect of this decision, etc., etc. In that sense, I used it once. So your confusion is genuine. I stopped there and I changed my expressions. I should have used differently the language, because here I'm using the word aspect as a technical term and in language studies, and performative and non-performative are not aspects of verbs. They are two different types of verbs with different functions related to the action which is denoted by the verb.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Any other question?
So, sir, as you mentioned, dormir. So, I got a little confused. Dormir is performative or non-performative?
See, what is the definition? Definition is that non-performative verbs are those types of verbs which denote action independent of speech. So, dormir is an action independent of speech. Parler, inviter. So, inviter, there is no other action involved except for what you convey by inviter. Promettre, you promise someone. So you promise something to someone, you do it in action. You do it by the word itself, and the action is included in the word itself. So it is a performative word. But dormir, courir, marcher, there is another action which is not in the language. Is it okay now?
Yes. So verbs like davuar, faluar would also fall in the category of non-performative.
Je dois aller. What is the function of this devoir here?
It's just supporting.
An obligation, sir?
Yeah.
An obligation, yes, an obligation. Now, is obligation, this kind of obligation, included in the verb itself? That the obligation that you have, is it some external factor to speech, or it is part of the speech itself? You have to,
External, no?
Part of the speech.
no, generally, suppose the vice chancellor has asked me that I must go to some place, so then I say je dois aller. So this obligation is not included in the language. Obligation is external to the language that I have used. Okay, so it will be non-performative in that sense. Okay, so now we come to another aspect, another topic, that is word and meaning, because this is what semantics is all about. Word and meaning. How do we understand the word and how do we understand the meaning attached to it? Every word has three aspects. Has three. Again, I'm using word aspect wrongly. I mean, not wrongly, but in a very common sense. Every word has what we call a sequence of sounds, a concept associated with the sequence of sounds. These two are two different facets of a word. This we discussed a little bit yesterday also. So, sequence of sounds and a concept associated. There are two technical terms for this. The sequence of sound is called signifiant. In English, it is called signifier. That's the sequence of sound. And the concept that is attached is called signifié or signified. If I say pomme, what is the sequence of sound? P, O, and M. So pomme, then this is the sequence of sound, pa, o, ma, pom. This is called signifiant or signifier in English. And what is the meaning associated with it? That is concept associated with the sound, that you know that it is a particular fruit. And this will be understood only by the French-speaking community in this context. So a sequence of sound that is a signifier can have a signifié, a signified, only for a particular speech community. And I said earlier that arbitrariness and convention, these two aspects decide the relationship between word and meaning. So actually, technically, word has two facets, signifiant and signifié. One is the sequence of sounds, the other is the concept attached to it. And this relationship between signifiant and signifié is decided arbitrarily on the basis of a convention. There is no reason why it should be like that. So sign, word, technically in this sense, anything that conveys meaning to us is called sign, which has two facets, signifier and signified. Signifiant, signifié. In French, signe, signifiant, signifié. So signifiant is the sequence of sounds that form the word, and signifié is the concept associated to the sequence of sounds. And this arbitrary and conventionally decided relationship between the two help us understand the meaning. Now, if I say, for example, why this is important. If I say, let's say, la pomme. You would visualize la pomme, but then I may start asking you, what is the color of your pomme? Then it may be a green apple, it may be a red apple, it may be a very red apple. What is the size of the apple? What is the origin of the apple in your mind? There could be various such facets when we think of the signified attached to a signifier. Signifier is the same. Pomme. If I say le chat, the cat. If I say cat, you will understand. K-A-T or sha, that's all. Two sounds which constitute the word. But the signified attached to it can be multiple. If I say le chat, then I ask you, you understood le chat? And you will say yes. Then I can ask you, then how is your cat? What is the color of the cat? Is it a sitting cat or a standing cat? Or is it a moving cat? Is it a meowing cat? Is it a cat that is looking at you or a cat that is looking away? And all these facets of meanings will be there in your mind. And all of you will visualize the cat differently. This is what we call the signified. Signifier conventionally decided in a language, signified also conventionally arbitrarily decided generally, yet there will be substantial variations in signified which reflect the variations in the way we create meaning. Okay? Any questions on that? Because with this, I will stop semantics. Today, we have done the basic essential studies on semantics. We have tried to understand what is a determiner. We have to try to understand time aspect and inflections of verbs accordingly, and also how inflections reflect the mood in the language. We have also slightly hinted at the way inflections have changed over time in subjunctive and conditional. We have tried to understand the notion of sign, signifier, and signified, and also the notion of performative and non-performative verbs. This is what we have studied today. Okay. Now, any questions? Niranjanji, yes, please.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Would you suggest any reading, like suggested reading, any reference books on semantics?
In French linguistics, there are several books, and French semantics also, there are several books. You can take any book on linguistics, but I won't suggest you to take those studies immediately. If you want, you can study, for example, the speech act theory by J.L. Austin. It is in English. He was an Oxford professor. In fact, his speech act, l'acte de parole, that we often use in so many manuals, etc., the concept comes from there. So you can look at that. Then you can look at, there are several books on semantics, and any book on linguistics, Initiation en Linguistique, is a very good book for your level. You can see chapters on semantics there also. Okay? Though, of course, it is a very...
Repeat the name of the last book that you said?
Initiation à la linguistique.
Okay.
Okay. And another book is Comment s'initier à la linguistique. These you will find in our libraries also. In French libraries, these are the books mainly used.
So who is the author?
There are three authors. I don't remember the name of the author, but you will find it very easily in any syllabus. In your syllabus also, you will find.
Thank you.
Okay, so very easily there are three authors. I think one is Dubois or something like that. That I don't remember presently. But semantics in itself is a very vast field. Presently, I would suggest that you remain with the course material that is given to you. That will be sufficient for your purpose presently. If you want to go further, deeper into the subject, it might you might find several books written on semantics in French itself.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so if there are no questions anymore, if the points that we discussed are clear, then let us study syntax. We have studied until now the two branches of linguistics yesterday, and one branch of linguistics today: phonology, phonetics, phonology, and morphology. And today we discussed also semantics, which is related to creation of meaning. But they are by and large, the creation of meaning by and large, it is part of this sentence, but we have seen the word and the sentence. Both are important in semantics. In syntax, what we study is the sentence, how sentences are formed in a language. What is a sentence, first of all? The first question is, what is a sentence? In contemporary linguistics, yesterday we defined the word. That which is when spoken, when uttered, that sequence of sound brings a meaning to you. But how and when do you understand the meaning? If I say only, let's say, democracy, you understand it, no doubt about it. But is there anything that I have conveyed? India has democracy, France has democracy. Then there is some meaning which is conveyed. So the meaning, the minimal unit to create a meaning in a language, that is a sentence. Now, this means that when you said, okay, you have conveyed me something. So, just okay, one okay can be a sentence. Many times, our gestures can be a sentence. If I say, then it is a sentence. Even my nod can be a sentence because the meaning is conveyed. Somebody asks you, would you like sugar in the tea? And you simply nod. So you have answered. You have created a meaning through certain gestures or through certain mumbling sounds. That can also be a sentence in a language, linguistically. In speech, they all function as a language. But we have another understanding also, which is related, that how we juxtapose, how we put together the words of different categories, which we studied under the title semantics, like determiners, nouns, verbs, etc., etc. How we put all of them together in a particular language, and what is the convention related to that. That also we study in syntax. So in syntax, we understand formation of sentences, and this has been a great this has been dealt with in great details in traditional grammars also. We understand in contemporary times in a different manner, but we never reject the older ways of formation of sentences because by and large it remains normative. What we add is that the minimal units that convey in a language, it's not only necessarily meaningful, but that which conveys a meaning to me is a sentence that we add. Otherwise, the basic concepts here also, we begin what we know already by the traditional grammar. That is, for example, sentence structure, subject, verb, and object in French, in English. In Indian languages, it is different. It is often subject, object, and verb. Verb comes at the end. In very old French, again, we had subject, object, and verb because Latin has that structure. So there are different types of sentence constructions that we know. For example, declarative, imperative, and subjunctive. You know about that. Okay. And there are minute changes in that. For example, if I say, nous allons au marché, this is a declarative sentence. And if I say, allons au marché, it becomes an imperative sentence. But if I utter a sentence like, je veux que nous allions au marché, you will say it is a subjunctive sentence, because subjunctive requires certain structure, and that structure we have used. But what is the meaning? What is the difference between allons au marché and je veux que nous allions au marché? In terms of meaning, it's almost the same. So you will see in English also we have leave please. This is an imperative sentence. If I say, I want you to leave from the room, I want you to leave immediately. Sortez is imperative. Je veux que tu sortes. For structure, it is subjunctive, but what is the meaning? The meaning is imperative. Then we pay attention to these aspects. That a structure is traditionally decided. There is a particular form in the language, but meaning can be somewhere different. I want you to eat the apple. Now, this is a subjunctive sentence. Sorry, this is in English, this is an imperative sentence. I want you to eat an apple. Or eat an apple. So the forms might be different. So a sentence structure formally and in terms of form and in terms of meaning might not correspond exactly according to the traditional grammar, what the way they have described it. So we have to understand this. When we analyze the language, what is the meaning? What is the difference in meaning? Allons au marché, je veux que nous allions au marché. And why these two structures are being used in two different situations, whereas they mean almost the same. So we have to understand this. In order to understand this, the basic declarative, imperative, etc., those categories are helpful. But since we notice that the structures are different, so we try to understand the analysis of a sentence structure in a different manner, slightly differently, and that is called immediate constituent analysis. This is a category given by Chomsky. In short, it is called IC analysis in English, or in French they call it l'analyse constituant immédiat. So l'analyse CI, that is also used. Is it fine? You see the difference, how the traditional grammar helps us understand, but their categories often leave us confused. So there are new contemporary categories in language studies that help us understand how sentences are formed. And what we study here in this context is the immediate constituent analysis as given by Chomsky in the context of what is known as transformational generative grammar. By transformation and generative, what we mean, the sentence can be transformed in many ways. Meaning will remain the same, and we concentrate on the meaning. It may have various forms, so transforms. The sentence might transform variedly, but meaning will remain the same. So transformation, and the sentence can be generated ad infinitum, which means that there could be various elements infinitely that may be added to a sentence. Je veux que nous allions à l'école pour rencontrer le professeur de nos enfants qui étudie les mathématiques avec les professeurs qu'il n'aime pas. So you can keep on adding. You just keep on adding. And this is ad infinitum. This is what we understand in a sentence structure. Then how to analyze a sentence. We have seen that there are various forms. So there are certain rules that we find. And for finding these rules, we come to what we call the kernel sentence. That is la phrase noyau. That is the basic sentence structure. Here the rules are very clear. A sentence in interrogative, imperative, or passive forms will have to be changed to its normal declarative active form. So any sentence that you find, you change it to its active declarative simple structure first. Once it is simple, active, declarative, then we will start analyzing it in terms of its immediate constituents. And here the immediate constituents are not subject, object, verb, etc., but, or even noun, etc., but what we call syntagm. But let's say, for example, if I have a sentence like La lettre a été écrite par lui. What is the kernel sentence? Il a écrit une lettre. La lettre a été écrite par lui. It is la phrase passive sentence. So we make it active first. Il a écrit une lettre. Est-ce qu'il a écrit une lettre? What is the kernel sentence? Il a écrit une lettre. So in the language, there is always a basic structure. We identify that as simple, active, affirmative sentence. Qu'il écrive une lettre, une phrase en subjonctif. Okay. Une phrase en subjonctif, you have to change it to il écrit une lettre. Qu'il écrive une lettre will be changed, il écrit une lettre. So similarly, you try to identify the kernel sentence. Once you have identified the kernel sentence, then you go ahead further and you explain it in terms of immediate constituents. What are the immediate constituents? There are primarily two. Syntagm nominal or noun phrase, or in French they use also phrase nominale. So phrase nominale, il écrit une lettre. Il écrit une lettre. So il and immediately the verb comes. Il écrit. These are the two basic aspects. He writes. That's all. Rest all is the added information. What he writes. Une lettre. So une lettre is an added information to the action of écrire. So il écrit une lettre. Il is syntagme nominal or phrase nominal, and écrit une lettre will be phrase verbal or syntagme verbal. Both the expressions are used. Okay. Now, if I say il écrit une lettre à son ami, I have added further generativity. If I have added further, what is the information? À son ami. It is additional. It might change its place also. It might change. For example, à son ami, il écrit une lettre. Il écrit une lettre à son ami. Il écrit, virgule, à son ami, virgule, une lettre. Three possibilities are there. So, this is syntagme prepositional or phrase prepositional. Both sentences, both expressions are used in French. Okay. If you try to appear in UGC net, etc., then I have seen them using mostly syntagme. But in linguistics, in French, both terms are used. So I hope it is clear that the syntagme prepositionnel can change its position in a sentence. Syntagme nominal and syntagme verbal, their position is fixed, and you identify syntagme nominal and syntagme verbal only after you have identified the basic declarative, simple, active structure of the sentence. Is it fine? If you have identified the basic simple active structure in a sentence, then you have identified the kernel, la phrase noyau. In many times exams, they ask you to identify la phrase noyau also. And the advantage of this kind of analysis is that you can break a sentence into its basic structures. Many times the other structures, they leave you confused. What is the meaning? So try to identify the basics of the sentence, then identify its active formation, and rest all will be meaning creation through different formal sentence structures. Structures can be many, they may take various forms, but we concentrate on basically the meaning. And the meaning we have to understand that it will be in the basic kernel form of the sentence. There could be various other forms also. We have taken a basic simple structure. Now, see this example. Il écrivait une lettre quand son père était arrivé. Now see, the different aspects are there. In this case, the entire sentence can be covered in one kernel sentence. Il écrivait une lettre, and the other will be son père est arrivé. These are the two basic kernel. Now, these two sentences are strictly speaking simple declarative and active forms, thus the two kernel sentences. Now, quand has a function here in the context of an adjoining phrase, syntagme adjoint. So they add an added syntagm, and generally the entire sentence with quand can be put to this immediate constituent analysis. What we do here, il écrit une lettre quand son père est arrivé. So il will be syntagme nominal. Écrit une lettre quand son père est arrivé. This will be entire syntagme verbal in French, verbal phrase. Then you can break it further. Écrivez une lettre, syntagme verbal, and quand son père est arrivé. This entire quand son père est arrivé is syntagme adjoint. It's entirely, this factor is added. This is what I told you, that this is part of generativity. Adjunct phrases can be added ad infinitum. For example, you just see what all can you add. Il écrivait une lettre quand son père est arrivé. Can you add something more to this? Yes, you can further add. Quand son père est arrivé, qui avait très faim parce qu'il n'avait rien mangé depuis le matin, car il n'a rien trouvé dans les restaurants, and you can go on adding. So adjunct phrases can be added ad infinitum. So all the adjunct added phrases are first part of the syntagme verbal, the first syntagme verbal, and then you keep on identifying each one of them. And once you identify all the syntagme adjoint, the meaning will be crystal clear too. And the structure and the formal way of presenting the sentence in the French language will become very clear to you. So this is the advantage of immediate constituent analysis, that it helps us reconstruct the sentences in terms of meanings, and if it has no meaning, then it will not be considered a sentence. The meaning has to be there. When we study here, I mean the basic simple sentences in a language. I don't mean any poetic usages. A very good example given by Chomsky himself is, I give you a sentence. It is not my sentence. It comes from Chomsky when he discusses all these issues, that a sentence may not have a meaning. As for example, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. According to traditional grammar, the sentence is correct. Colorless, it's an adjective to green, and it is an adjective to ideas. So two adjectives can be added to ideas. So colorless green ideas sleep, verb, perfectly in its position, and furiously. This is a sentence given by Chomsky to understand that if there is no meaning, then the sentence may not be considered a valid sentence. But according to traditional grammar, this sentence is correct. You cannot find anything wrong with this according to the traditional grammar. But colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Does it mean anything to you? How can ideas be green? And how can green ideas be colorless? Not possible. Then how can ideas sleep? So colorless green ideas sleep. And then how can you sleep furiously? You cannot sleep furiously. Furiously is just anachronistic to, just opposite to sleeping. In sleeping, all activities cease to exist. But you sleep furiously. What does it mean? It has no meaning. So such a sentence, which is sanctioned correct according to the traditional grammatical categories, will not be considered a correct sentence in the Chomskyan analysis of immediate constituents. So the meaning, in a very simple way, see, somebody can say that it is a poetic sentence, and in poem it might have a meaning. Okay, that's fine. There you can do it. And in the poetic context, you might try to identify metaphors, etc., whatever it may mean in a particular context. Then you identify meanings in those contexts. But otherwise, it will have no meaning. So here we take up the basic simple structures as used in common language, then give a simple active declarative form to it, then you go further to it. Okay. Yes, Chanchalji, you have a question?
Oh, yes, sir. Actually, this particular the sentence which has been quoted by Mr. Chomsky, it's like an abstract painting. It reminds me, which doesn't have any meaning, but still it gives many imaginative ideas.
All sentences give you imaginative ideas, but it has no meaning. It is cited by several people, but
Yes, yes,
originally
okay.
it comes from Chomsky in the context of this immediate constituent analysis, and its poetic usages, and a lot has been written regarding to that. That I am not concerned here. What we try to understand here is the basic sentence structure, because you see, subject, verb, object, and all these categories leave us confused. I have given you examples. That's subjunctive and imperative. Je veux que nous allions au marché. Allons au marché. What is the meaning difference? How do you say that je veux que nous allions au marché is not imperative? Structure wise, it is subjunctive, but how is it not imperative? It is imperative as much. I want you not to eat sugar. Somebody may have a diabetes and the doctor might say, I want you not to eat sugar, something like that. You can think of the context. Is it not an imperative sentence? But traditional grammar leaves us confused. It says that it's not an imperative sentence. Not only that, when you teach your children in a class, students in a class, you might have students from different backgrounds, and they ask you such questions. As for example, I myself faced it. In the beginning of my career, I was appointed in Banaras Hindu University, and I had students who knew Sanskrit very well. And they asked me, when I started teaching imperative, they asked me, sir, why is it so that imperative is not there in the third person? Then I said, by French class instinct, I thought that how can imperative is in the third person? It can be only in first or second person. Then they asked, sir, that, okay, second person is still we understand by your logic, but why is it in first person? How do you order yourself? Okay, desire. But then I can desire for someone else. Like, I want you not to eat sugar. Okay, I want her not to eat sugar. This is third person. What is the difference between I want you not to eat sugar and I want her not to eat sugar? So if you take the meaning, it leaves you confused. The traditional categories. And then I went and saw that in Sanskrit, and not only Sanskrit, in old Latin, etc., they also had third person imperative constructions in their grammar. So there are several structures. Since that structure creates this kind of confusion, hence we require this newer method of analyzing the sentence structure and understanding the sentence structure. Is it fine now? Any other question? Any other remark? So from now onwards also, please don't teach the students that there is a third person imperative, because grammar books or our manuals don't prescribe to that. But let us be aware of these facts, because linguistically the structures exist, which may get subsumed in other structures, but in terms of meaning and in the minimal unit, the first unit of meaning in a language is sentence. With this we have to understand, and then we try to further analyze the sentences. Yes, another question, somebody? Yes.
Sir, actually, just because I have the opportunity to listen to you, there is one construction which is very confusing. If you could help me regarding that, that is in French is s'agit, il s'agit. It has so many various sorts of implications. If you could,
So,
I don't want you to expect anything, but actually, if there is anything you may say regarding that, regarding il s'agit, the special construction.
here in this context, all I can say that it is a fixed expression, il s'agit de. Now, how will you analyze it? Il s'agit de. We have many such sentences. For example, let's take, qui a écrit une lettre? Now, qui, it is a question, so interrogative cannot be. Now you answer it. Il a écrit une lettre. Elle a écrit une lettre. So you put a head to the sentence. Then you analyze it. So similarly, you identify the expressions il s'agit de, and then what all follows. If the structure is not in simple active declarative, then it might be a problem for you. Otherwise, il s'agit de, il you identify as a neuter subject, so it is a syntagme nominal, il, and s'agit de, faire quelque chose, then your entire verb and the entire syntagme verbal will be identified accordingly. Then you can identify always that the meaning is attached to agit de, how you function. Il s'agit de. It is related to the action regarding. Agir is action. S'agir related to action. This is what we studied in previous also, that how the reflexive verbs function, how the list of verbs which are added with et, they function. So their functions and some fixed expressions also can be analyzed, not just because of the expressions, but how they create meaning syntactically. In this context, this is what I can say. Is it fine, Chanchalji?
Yes, of course. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. So we have understood today that what is a kernel sentence, that is phrase noyau. Then we try to understand the phrase noyau in certain sentences. You can also try to do it. We have tried to understand how different formal structures can convey the same meaning, and we give importance to the meaning that is being conveyed in a speech. So we reduce the varieties of forms into the basic sentence form, and then try to identify the syntagm verbal and syntagm nominal. Okay? So there could be various structures accordingly, and you can try to understand the basic structures in terms of immediate constituent analysis as explained by Chomsky. This has two aspects: transformation, because there are various forms in which one sentence gets uh, changed, so transformation, and information can be added ad infinitum, so any sentence can be prolonged till infinity, and that is the addition of syntagm adjoint. Syntagm adjoint can be identified by the fact that it changes its place in the sentence. When sentences have words like question words, ki, ka, etc., then you have to answer, find a declarative sentence where you add a verb, a head, like il, el, nu, whatever you find the convenient in that particular context, and then accordingly you try to identify, explain the immediate constituents. So this approach helps us understand the longer and the larger sentences given often in French. Indian languages, sentences are often not so long, because the notion of syntagm adjoint is slightly different in Indian languages. And in French, specifically, you can see German, also many European languages, then syntagm adjoint can be added by various strategies of using comma, etc. So using the strategy, using the analysis tools in terms of syntagm nominal, syntagm verbal, and syntagm adjoint, syntagm prepositional, etc., helps us understand such longer sentences in its simpler forms, and thus understand the meaning, thus constitute the meaning that is being conveyed to us. It is fine. On my part, this is what all I have to say. Further, this is a subject in which we try to actually do exercises. You can take any sentence from any book on your study material, any novels that you study, any text that you study, and just do these exercises of identifying the phrase noyau, the kernel sentence, which is active declarative form, and then try to identify syntagm nominal, syntagm verbal, and then syntagm adjoint, syntagm prepositional, etc. in sentences. This helps you in understanding the text and understanding also how a student constitutes the text. When your learner is in front of you, if you are a teacher, when you try to translate a text, in all those situations, it helps you understand the mistakes of in pedagogical situations, mistakes, errors that the students do, and in translation, it helps you understand the source text. And it has some implications in literary theory also. Those who are interested in literature, you may find that analysis of a sentence in terms of some of the categories that we discussed earlier and that we discuss here also, it helps us understand the poetry and also the prose forms with greater clarity. That's it. Now, if you have any questions, any remarks, etc., then I'm here to answer. Anything that is not clear to you? Yes, Karishma ji.
Bonjour, monsieur. Sir, I actually have a doubt regarding yesterday's topic about the phonetics. Will we be getting questions for the exam, like change the sentence into the phonetical transcription way? Will we get those type of questions?
Normally, you should get either sentences or if not the words. So it depends. It may be words, it may be sentences, it may be there. If it is part of your syllabus, then it may be there, and such questions are asked. In traditional MA, as is done in universities, such questions are asked in universities.
Okay. And one more doubt I have, like I have written two sentences. I tried changing it to the phonetical transcription way yesterday, but do we put like two lines on each side of each word? I just
Oh,
wanted to.
yes, yes. Normally, when you put phonetic transcription, either you
Yes.
do it this way, and in phonology, you will find that a bracket, big bracket, is used.
Okay.
So you can use any of the two, but phonologically, if you're doing, then big bracket, and in phonetics, if you're doing scientifically, then slash. So generally, you will have to use big brackets, generally,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter much. You can do it the way you
Okay.
like. The way question has been asked, you can frame it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other question, any other point that you want to discuss? If some of you want to appear in UGC net, etc., you will see that always they ask one or two questions on immediate constituent analysis. Always. I have seen it for years. So this is a very important exercise that you should undertake. Immediate constituent analysis is a very important aspect in syntax in contemporary times. Okay, so anything else related to yesterday's class, today's class, anything that you want to ask? Okay.
Sir, do you have any reference PPT which you could share with us through which you have taught us?
No, I don't have any reference PPT, but the basic material I think they should send you soon, which I have already submitted.
So we have got the
We,
online
No, I
materials.
no, I didn't understand. Please repeat. I think Harini ji said, yeah.
yes, sir. Sir, we have got the online material, but you have used different examples and all those things. So
No, no.
if you have
I
anything.
understand. I understand that this whatever I have used, I have submitted to the department, to this university, and I think they should share that with you. On my part, I have told them that it can also be shared. You have already got a material which existed, and this material I have already submitted. I don't have a PPT, but I prepared a write-up for all the four units which I have already submitted. I think very soon they may be in a position to send it to you. uh, I should have done it earlier, but since I shifted my university, I could not prepare it earlier. But I submitted around 1 month ago. So they should be in the process of composing, etc. You would have got one set of material which you study. After that, whatever I have said, you can add it, and perhaps it is available to you in recorded form also, because I see this being recorded. So I don't know how
Yes,
it.
sir.
So you can get the recording also, plus whatever help material I have used with the examples, etc. I have prepared that material also, and I've already submitted. I don't have it anymore with me, but I have already submitted to the university. Maybe they will send you soon, but I'm not sure how soon. That I have no idea. But on my part, I have already submitted. I don't have a PPT, but it is material, proper material that I have prepared. write-up that I prepared, which I have shared. And in the meanwhile,
Okay.
the entire lecture also recorded, so I think you can use that also. I hope you get the recordings. That aspect, I don't know how it functions.
Yes, sir. We do get the recorded things,
Yes.
and ma'am, Dipanvita ma'am will share with it.
So then you will get the recording also, and then you will, in due course, you can ask Dr. Deepanvita also. She would know exactly how and when you may be able to get the write-up.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So anything else on any of the 4 units? Because I believe that in linguistics you will not have any more sessions. So anything related to linguistics, if you want to discuss.
Uh, Sir, I would like to know the questions generally what is coming. Have you just given those things to the some ideas in that book which you have sent it, like questions, probable questions which can come for the exams? Because linguistic is, I feel it's very vast and we have not got all the materials together. So I
No,
feel
no.
little lost.
You will, you will get, you don't study linguistics. Linguistics is a very vast field. You don't have to do that. You are doing this as a paper as a student in French studies. So in a very limited manner, in all the 4 aspects that we have studied, the questions that I have continuously repeated, similar kind of questions. What is a morpheme? What is a phoneme? What is phonology? What is phonetics? Then there is one principle of double articulation, which I hinted, and it should be there in your other material also. So principle of double articulation by Martinet. This is a principle given by Martinet, André Martinet. So he was a great French linguist. But this is a very important principle in linguistics. So which I did discuss while discussing phonology. So that much is there. Whatever I had discussed, little bit, and whatever you have in your material, just concentrate on that. Don't go anywhere beyond that. No need to read any books, etc. The self-learning materials are more than enough for your level. Of course, you can do MA and PhD in linguistics itself, but that is not our purpose. Our purpose is to understand the basics of linguistics, how to identify the words, whether it is voiced, non-voiced, whether it is what is the place and a manner of articulation of a particular sound. All these things that we have discussed, only that is sufficient. So in all the 4 topics, phonology, morphology, etc., all that we have discussed, don't go beyond that, beyond the material that you have been provided. No need to go beyond that. That will be sufficient for you for your examination purposes. No need to go beyond that, because it is a very vast field and our purpose is not to become linguists. And that may be my purpose, but not your purpose. Your purpose is to get the basics of linguistics, only that much which helps you in other fields. That's why I have been continuously talking about the applications of whatever we have learned in terms of pedagogy, in terms of didactics, in terms of translation, and in terms of literature, because this is what we do mostly. Our purpose is either we teach whatever levels, but we teach and we try to resolve the problems that our students face while learning, and while we also face in conveying our ideas. So this helps you just shape up your ideas to be conveyed and understand the difficulties of your learners. That is one application. The other application is translation. So in translation also, whatever application basics are there, I have hinted at that. And in study of literature also, because entire 20th century literary theory is based on linguistics. But then we cannot do it so much at this level, and we are not supposed to do. There is a certain level that we are supposed to achieve. And also in UGC NET exam, etc., which is a very important aspect if you are a student of MA in French. So whatever is asked, all that I have kept in mind. and I have hinted sufficiently for those aspects only. And the material that you have got and the one which I have submitted, which I believe you will get subsequently, if not, you have this lecture recorded. I have almost dealt with everything in this lecture also. This will be sufficient for these aspects, for these facets of linguistics. Otherwise, it is a vast subject. You don't need to go to any linguist. In fact, this is one of the points in mind when I believe they made the material, that they did not go to a linguist, but someone who is in the field of French and understand these requirements in linguistics. So otherwise, linguists could have done it, but they can do it in their own way without understanding our applications to it. So very briefly, very tailor-made way, I have tried to do it. That is sufficient for you, the material that you have got along with these lectures. Okay, thank you. Niranjanji, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Where do we get the exercises on IC analysis? Will they be in the materials that you have?
Whatever I have prepared is also there, but see, IC analysis, you don't need a separate exercise. Take any material, any sentence in French and try analyzing it. It's as simple as that. Any sentence in French or in English can be analyzed in terms of IC analysis. I would suggest you, whatever French you have got in writing in your material, some of them you just as a play, you can't do it only always, but some of them you just start analyzing.
Okay.
There are 3-4 categories which we have discussed. Which one is syntagme prepositional in a sentence, which one is syntagme adjoint, which one is syntagme verbal, and which one is syntagme nominal. Try to identify these 4. That is sufficient for you. Okay. So that is sufficient. And just concentrate on this one, the material that you have got and whatever we discussed. Otherwise, there are several books, there are several sites also, but that is not our purpose. You may better concentrate and apply these aspects, learn to apply them, whatever you have learned in these courses, into your other fields of learning. That is more important. Application is more important. In all the 4, phonology and phonetics, both we did a little bit, and then morphology and semantics and syntax. All the 4 that we have done, try to understand this only. There is only one more aspect which I believe we won't be able to do it. That is a little bit of lexicography, how to use a dictionary. But that nowadays we have online dictionaries, etc., which are all tailor-made. That's why that aspect is not very relevant. It helps us in translation also sometimes, how to make a lexicon and all that. But then in your field of translation, somebody will help you. There would be experts discussing that on how to create your own lexicon. If you have got a technical text, then you identify all the technical terms, you arrange them, how to find the equivalents of technical terms and all these aspects. So in translation, we do it very comfortably, very easily. There is no requirement to add that in linguistics. But if you go to the larger materials on internet, etc., there will be a lot more. But that is not your requirement. That is not your requirement, because linguistics is a discipline in itself. There are students who are doing MA in linguistics. And there are countries where you find, not in India, but abroad, US and others, you find MSc in linguistics. So Master of Science in Linguistics. Then there are places where it is taught as part of social sciences also. Nowadays, it has a lot of applications in artificial intelligence also, but all those are not your aspects. Everyone has a limited syllabus, and accordingly we will study it. So whatever is applicable to French studies, we have already covered that by and large. Okay, anything else? Any questions? Any other doubt, confusion that you have? So all doubts are clear? Regarding exams also, don't have any tension. Very basic study and understanding is sufficient. We have done that. It's a very marks fetching subject. If you know the definition, you know it. If you don't know it, what is a phoneme? We have defined it. Minimal unit of sound in a language. What is a morpheme? Minimal meaningful unit. So these definitions are very clearly demarked. You don't have to invent anything here, just learn those basics. And most of the times you try to apply whatever you have learned. Application is very important. You go to teach in a class, many of you are working, many of you may be teaching, many of you may be translating. So if you are teaching somewhere, try to understand how the children speak, how your learners speak, and they may be adult learners. You may be teaching some 20, 30 years old, 40 years old people. What mistakes do they make? And what is the pattern of those mistakes? Try to identify them. The moment you try to identify those aspects, in that process, you try to identify their own interference in the language also. Because the language they speak at home, it will interfere. And your the training, basic training in linguistics, phonology, etc., it helps you identify that. Even the mistakes in terms of conveying meaning, they want to convey the meaning, how they are constructing the meaning. That construction of meaning often gets affected by the way they do it in their mother tongues, according to their age, etc. So many things that we have discussed. So look at those aspects and apply. Application is more important in this field. Okay. Okay, good. So then on my part, I have nothing more to add. If you have anything else, any other questions, etc., then I'm here. Otherwise, we can gradually disperse from today's class. I hope you enjoyed the class. Enjoyment is more important than learning. If you enjoyed learning, learning will automatically happen. Though I did not share any jokes, etc., because the class is being recorded. But normally I try to add jokes and some laughing moments, etc., in a class.
Thank you so much, sir. The class was very interactive. We learned a lot from you.
Thank you. So I am grateful for your kind audience for 2 days, or both the days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Hope to
sir.
hope
Thank
to
you
do
so
another
much.
class with you very soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
So,
Somebody has raised a hand. I think Siba or Siba. If you have anything to add, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, it's all right. I think it was a mistake. Somebody had.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
But you
I still see two people here. Do you have to say something? Mohan Rajji and Alia. Mohan Raj Vijayan and Alia Drew. Would you like to say something? Or if not, then I will now leave the meeting. Okay, thank you.